what's effectively a dynamic landscape. It's going to change again. We haven't had the rainfall of monsoon proportion in a long time. I think, 2008, we had the dolly sit on top of us. I had a field crew in the woods for 6 months at that time. They didn't like that here. They were camping in the woods. It felt like the Pacific Northwest. But I remember the bridge blowing out here and everything happening downtown. And, that is what I'm hoping on some of these wetlands. When that kind of year comes in, I would expect water to sit there a very long time. Now, I have a quick funny story on the one in the parking lot. I had a gentleman, a young gentleman from high school, go out there and took all the logs out of it, ran his 4-wheel drive around it, had fun. We all like to go out and do a little running on the side. It's a high school thing. I was approached by our law enforcement officer on what kind of cost was associated with that in case the judge wants to and I told him, you know what, he probably gave me more compaction than I could ask for, so that's fine. Tell him to come work for me for 1 day instead of fighting. So that's what I told him.
Is that what happened?
Well, he didn't. I think he paid out and went on his way. But, that education component's there. That's the nice thing about the wetland approach and this kind of a modified Southwest technique. Now, some of these techniques may not work in areas. You may have to put a liner in there. And they often do that in schools. Sometimes they'll put a liner and that'll sit there past our generation sometimes. They just recently completed one in Las Cruces behind the major dam that blocks the 90-year flood coming. They put a wetland back there with reclaimed wastewater. And they're actually pumping water to that and providing wetland habitat. But they did put a geotextile layer in there with clay layer soil as well. So it's a little, because that's all sand and gravel. That water will go right away. So I'm curious to see over the next few years what plants show up there. That sort of thing. And with Blue Lake as well. I've got a student from Capitan High School. She's in the FFA. She wants to look at some forest projects. And I'm thinking this project is really suited for her, and I'm trying to keep her on some long-term monitoring where maybe some classes can continue to come up there over the seasons and try to assess what's going on, what the change is. That's part of the HSP reporting as well. We have to have a monitoring place in effect, and we report to the state regularly on how that money was spent. And then Mark can come out and inspect it. He came out on Grindstone and what'd you say that day? I can't remember. He said we were all kind of worried. I think.
That was good.
Well, we were a little worried at first because when you look at something like that,
Yeah.
that you're done in the meadow, and it tends to make you question whether your technique's working or not. And if you shot your elevations correctly, that's the main thing. You have to know your elevations and what you're working with. But ultimately, when you can get back to that, where it's disappeared and it's underneath and it's there. And this is in conjunction with the new bike trails that are going up on Grindstone Mesa. That whole area is going to be a real draw for folks to go up and take a hike, take a bike ride. And I think this is a nice place to come stop one day when the rainy season comes in and take a look.
So have you already seen an increase overall in a lot of the wildlife in those areas?
Nothing here yet because this just completed.
But the Blue Lake?
But Blue Lake, yes.
Yeah.
Quite a bit. In fact, the deer were there watching me build it. Just coming up from the other side. They could smell the moisture of the soil when you pull that soil. Some of the areas we pulled out of here, there was active water underneath. It was just sitting there. So it's there. We're just going to make sure it stays there. And it's cheaper than dynamite.
Where is that on Grindstone?
On the Grindstone?
Yeah.
It's up on the very top, on the mesa itself. When you get to the very top and the road almost ends, the bike trails are coming in just below. The bike trails are below the road.
Okay.
You guys are working on that.
Yes, so it's within that Grindstone bike trail loop, is that correct?
It's up on those two ridges that kind of move out. The one that overlooks into the mountain gods and then comes back, and then one goes out to the other and drops down.
Okay.
So, yes, ma'am.
Talking about deer, if there are more water sources in the area outside of town, is it feasible that if everybody actually quit feeding the deer, that the deer wouldn't come to town in the
I
numbers they
think
do,
we
or do
have-
you think they would still be
You
here?
know, I think they'll still be here. I think we
What
have
draws them?
set populations. They're gonna be here, it's gonna fluctuate. You've got golf courses, you've got other things that are going on. Like Mark said, there's a lot of habitat here. And it may not be just someone feeding it, but it does have an effect, and it can be localized. I've seen deer populations here that already have, big tumors on the side. They're actually papillomavirus that they're growing because they're in high densities, and they're not eating what they should be eating. And you can see the difference. They stand next to your car, and you go out in the woods somewhere, and they run away from you. So that approach. It's kind of like the goose populations across the U.S. You get resident goose populations that just sit on golf courses, and they sit there year-round because the resource is there. So I think there is the benefit to getting these edges, to giving them some of that option to get up into that territory. And we will see quite a bit up there, but I still think there'll be resident populations. I think it's an issue across the nation. A lot of this. Yes, sir.
You know, there was a spin-off on last, Mark Holby, about the deer. And of course, you mentioned that one slide that called, I think, the carrying mode for a certain area. And you also said that feeding the deer would generally, just give a false feed and just overload that. So with this area being, I would say, overpopulated by that, and also that since they're essentially domesticated right now, so when they're born, they're raised here in town, they really don't know wildlife. They're not, as Mary was saying, I don't believe they're going to come out. I mean, it's out there, it's going to stay here. So what is the fishing, the game of fishes, or your idea of what is going to happen in this general area? Because I believe the density is going to be denser. So what are the options you think, for the village to do later?
Well, there's been some talk about trap and transplant. So moving them, high population deer in one area and moving them into other areas where there aren't as many. And if the habitat is suitable, the deer will do really well in those other areas. There's a couple things we do. We do a hard release and a soft release, and we're doing a study on that right now to see the effect on survivability of those moved deer. A hard release is just opening up the trailer and letting them out. Of course, near a water source and in suitable habitat, but they're just let out the trailer, and they're left to find their own water. Whereas a soft release will provide water. They'll be in a fenced enclosure for water, some supplemental feeding so they get back on their feet. The effect of drugs, if used on them, wears off, and they have a chance to become more acclimated to their new environment. So we're doing a study right now to see, well, is it more beneficial to do a soft release versus a hard release?
So is that a study that you're looking at that will affect this particular area?
Bruigosa right now is being looked at as a potential source for deer to be moved, and then in turn, some may be soft release and some may be hard release. And depending on what's found out in this study, which we're using on deer that were moved from Silver City, because they have the same issue in Silver City, hundreds, if not thousands of deer within the city limits of Silver City. They moved some of those to the Caballo Mountains and some into the boot heel of the state. Oh man, what's the name of the mountains down there? I can't think of them, but it's on the Arizona, New Mexico state line.
Chiricahua?
It could be, yeah.
Is it true that Silver City is working with game and fish as far as hunting involved within the municipality?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. They, just this last fall, they implemented a special bow hunt for female or immature deer only within the city limits. Well, it's not within the city limits. It actually excludes the city limits because of ordinances like distributing firearms or projectiles within the city limits, much like here, it's unlawful to do that. So it's just outside the city limits, but like here, there's so much, urban interface, open areas where a lot of deer live versus right in the middle of downtown. So yeah, there has been some hunting and trapping and transplanting, so kind of a combo.
How's that going? Is that, I mean, as far as positive, negative?
Definitely positive. 2 years ago, we moved a ton of deer through trapping and transplanting. This year, it's hard to catch a deer because we feel like the population has been lowered somewhat. So it was harder to get those deer under the net, because there just weren't as many deer. I'm not sure what the success rate was on that hunt, but I know they killed several deer, hunters did.
What was the population's reaction to the hunting?
It's mixed, definitely mixed, and it'd be the same situation if we were to implement the same thing here. Some people are all right with hunting, and some people aren't. So there'll always be that, balancing act, that finding following that fine line and try to do the best thing for the resource. I'm kind of thinking a combination of trapping and transplanting and hunting would probably be the best solution.
You see us having to go to that approach in this particular area?
More than likely, it's been looked at for years. The previous sergeant who was here, Ben Bird, some of you may or may not know him. When he was here, or newly here, they actually did a survey, ground survey, counting deer, and they counted over 1,000 deer in the first hour between like 5 different groups of observers, and that was in the village limits. Nothing ever came of that. But the idea of, some kind of hunt, archery, or something within a designated area around the village limits is probably an option, and trapping and transplanting is probably an option. There is an overpopulation definitely within the village limit. Another, like Todd said, doing these habitat projects, providing water, controlled burns, thinning, that'll grow, more food, nutritious food, burning all that old, all the dead stuff, pine needles, branches, and dead trees and everything, giving, opening up the soil to allow new growth of grasses and forbs and new shrubs which are beneficial to wildlife. Providing water hopefully will allow some of those deer to get out of the village limits on their own.
So that'd be something to be going to address.
Absolutely. And we talked quite a bit about that, especially in the bird scar edges. Gavilan Ridge is seems fair share of fire, and a lot of loss of habitat in some aspects, but also a seed bank in a lot of ways. It's no longer a cattle lot, and it's also creating some opportunities for wildlife habitats.
I was wondering if one of you knew or could tell us the rest of the story on that elk kill up by Las Vegas. Do you know anything about 100 elk found dead?
There's something.
I know what you're talking about,
Yeah.
and I believe it was something to do with the water.
There was something.
Toxic, toxic level. It's a naturally occurring,
But it was natural.
Naturally occurring organism.
they weren't poisoned, and it wasn't some strange disease, but it was some component to the water that was toxic to the elk, and it killed a bunch of them.
One thing I worry about, we saw a mountain lion near the elementary school 3 years ago,
Yeah.
sitting there and not leaving the backyard. And those things are the issues that he has to deal with on a regular basis. And at that point, it becomes lethal because you can't dart an animal next to an elementary school and hope that everything works out okay. There's a lot of issues there. So, public age.
You had mentioned that you did a lot of farm antelope relocation, but is that one that tends to be more successful, they're just more adaptable?
I think so, yeah. They're just a little more adaptable, and they could put up with that stress of being corralled and manhandled and put in a horse trailer and driven hundreds of miles across the state. Let go, and then they seem to do really good. We've released, I think, 75 antelope this year to Fort Stanton. You could go out there just about any day in the BLM portion, or anywhere, on 380 near the Capitan area, and you'll find dozens of antelope that we move. Some will have radio collars on, some might have a near transmitter on, but a lot of those antelope came from the Roswell area, which were depredating on crops around the Pickles Valley there. Trapped and moved to Fort Stanton, and a bunch came from the northeast part of the state around Springer. And they've done really well, very high survival rate.
One thing I wanted to bring up, if you're hiking in the woods, there's an active bear study going on with Mexico State University. They do have hair snare traps, they call them. They're not actually a trap. They're a baited station that has barbed wire and a triangle around it, and it's encouraging a bear to come in, snag some hair on that barbed wire, and then that can be sent off for analysis. They're trying to get some population dynamics through some cameras as well, to look at some densities that are on the forest, on this district and on Sacramento District. So, if you run across something in the woods that looks man-made, it may have a sign on it at the trailhead, it may be around, but they are working through the White Mountain Wilderness, part of the Capitans. They're, working in that area. They're returning to these trapped areas about every 2 weeks to check on them and move them. So, just something to be aware of, and we're aware of it too. So we work in conjunction with those students through their master's programs, and they're working on studies that help us and help the state as well. So, the other thing is with feral hogs, APHIS, which is another USDA group, they're actually working on, looking at options on the White Mountains to do some inventory, to see if they have any up there. They're actually looking at some options for camera trapping. So you may run across the camera every now and then, just smile. Thumbs up. So, yes, ma'am.
You mentioned the Habitat Stamp Program. Where does that money come from? Is it something, it sounds stupid, but do
No,
people
it's a
buy
good
stamps?
question.
Do people buy stamps?
It's actually, they call it a stamp. I don't think they actually have a stamp. But when you're gonna hunt or on public land, there's a $5 stamp purchase with that
Oh,
license.
that's what.
And that's where that money goes into. One thing that's happened in the southeast region, they used to calculate funding through a general maintenance fund on existing structure. And we would ask for a certain amount per year to manage the tanks that are out there. And it was around $10,000. And that's gonna put 2 people like myself and Sam out there fixing it when you go to 45 of them. And it could be a minimal cost at one, but you gotta take in the cost of the vehicle to get there, the tools required, everything else with labor. And so sometimes one may cost, $20 for the day, or one may cost $200 because the whole fence is wrecked on it, or, there may be a hole in the tank. One thing that I'm working towards too is an inventory of that legacy that's out there. There's a lot of old tanks that are out there that are ugly. Unfortunately, a lot of them were put in the wilderness prior to it being wilderness, especially on the Capitans, and they were brought in with a helicopter. Well, I don't have that kind of funding anymore. So that's something we're looking into, that legacy. How can we dismantle something in a wilderness? We have a lot of limitations there on mechanical movement of any equipment through any kind of wilderness. And so there's some legacy out there. If you run across one, let me know. Just come by the station, say, this is what I saw, I'll take a picture, and we can tell you if it's under a maintenance schedule. Any information is wonderful. As hunting season gets closer, I get a call every day. Hey, tell me about the tank that's up on this ridge, and what are you seeing over there? Those things are, viable options for hunters to know where waters are in a habitat that they're going to hunt for the season. So, one thing to think about. On the other end of things, I get a lot of people that are birders that come out and want to look at some birds, and when there's water, there's sometimes birds in the morning, late afternoon, and so sometimes that can be there. Quentin Hayes here at the university, we've done a lot of bat captures on waters, and we're looking at some of the species that occur here. Very important to have water available for bats. A piece of bark this big on a snag can hold 200 bats, right? So pretty important for all those mosquitoes out there. So, something to think about. All right, well, thank you all very much. Enjoyed it.
Thank you.